Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC Vegas 56, Alexander Volkov versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik just ended, and this is going to be my UFC Vegas 56 post-fight. I'm mainly going to talk about the main event, Volkov versus Rozenstruik, as well as the co-main event, Evloev versus Ige. I'm going to touch briefly on some of the other fights, but going into this fight card, it left a lot to be desired. And I know there's going to be some people in the comments saying, oh, there was a lot of great fights on this card, a lot of great finishes. But for me, it's the anticipation of the card and knowing these fights are super relevant within the division. And I know there was a lot of fun fights on this card, a lot of great finishes. But at the end of the day, there was very few fighters on this card where you look at them and you're like, oh, this guy is going to be a problem within the division or is going to be relevant within the division very, very soon. So that's why I was a little bit down on this card. But at the end of the day, there were still some great finishes, and I really enjoyed the co-main event, which was the fight that I was most looking forward to on the card. We'll get to that in a second, but if you guys enjoy UFC predictions, UFC post-fights, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. I'll be doing a bunch of UFC 275 prediction videos as well as a live UFC 275 post-fight next week. So if you look at the main event, we had Alexander Volkov versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik in a heavyweight fight that I thought my official prediction was Alexander Volkov by decision. I just thought he was the better striker. I did not think either one of these guys was going to try to grapple in this fight, and I just basically thought that he would outpoint Jairzinho Rozenstruik all 5 rounds and win the fight. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik, if I had one sentence to describe him most of the time, is lack of urgency. And that's what cost him in a lot of fights. He just kind of sits back, is losing a fight, getting outpointed, and just doesn't have any urgency. Well, this fight, that didn't end up being a problem because the fight ended so quickly. And we're going to talk about the stoppage here in a minute. But the fight started out, Volkov was kind of kicking to the body like I suspected that he would, pumping the jab, moving forward. And as the fight went on, Jairzinho Rozenstruik actually showed some urgency in this fight. He threw like a 5 or 6 punch combination with nasty power shots, but none of them really landed. And he did not get the respect of Alexander Volkov. Volkov just sat there in the pocket, dodged some of the shots. I don't think any of them really clipped him significantly. And then Volkov continued to move forward, pump the jab, clips him with a picture-perfect right hand, rocks Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and then just swarms him for the finish. He never goes down officially. He was hurt badly. At one point, I thought he might have even been flash KO'd by one of the shots. Herb Dean was a little bit indecisive on the stoppage, but he stops the fight. Jairzinho Rozenstruik kind of stands up, protests. He was never really down. He just kind of scrambled out to the right against the cage. And I know a lot of people are probably going to complain about this stoppage. They say Jairzinho Rozenstruik never even went down. He was just trying to get out of the pocket and, avoid the shots. Had Herb Dean not stepped in, Volkov would have continued to tee off on him and he would have slept him. So I saw all I need to see. Volkov is the better fighter. He was going to TKO or KO Rozenstruik regardless if Herb Dean stepped in then or 5 seconds later. And a lot of people might have been complaining, had Herb Dean waited a little bit, saying it's a late stoppage. And I think that this is one of those stoppages. Okay, well, maybe was it a little bit weird? Was the indecisiveness of Herb Dean, did it make the stoppage kind of weird? Yes. But at the end of the day, we saw all we needed to see. I mean, he clipped Rozenstruik with 4 or 5 clean punches. There were some of them that missed when he was swarming him. He knocked the mouthpiece out. I believe he might have even flash KO'd him at one point in time, but he would have finished him regardless. The stoppage of Herb Dean really did not matter. Volkov was going to get that first round finish, and I'm actually pretty surprised. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is a guy that is very tough to put away, and I did not think Volkov was going to be able to come out there and TKO or KO him in the first round nonetheless. And that's a great performance. At the end of the day, though, the real reason I was kind of down on this main event, and I've told you guys, if you follow the channel, you know this about me. When I see fights, even when you have top-ranked fighters, both of these guys are ranked in the top 10, when I don't see a path to the title or a path to being a contender within the division, it kind of puts a damper on the fight for me. And when I look at a guy like Alexander Volkov, I don't see him beating Francis Ngannou. I don't see him beating a guy like Cyril Gane. I don't see him beating Tom Aspinall. I don't see him beating John Jones. So it's really hard for me to get excited and say, oh, I can't wait to see who Alexander Volkov takes on next. This was a big win over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And at the same time, because of the heavyweight division, At this point in time, it's starting to get a lot better. At one point, I believed it was the worst division in the UFC. It's starting to grow and get a bit better. It's one of those fights where it's like, is Volkov ever really going to be even in a number one contender fight, let alone fight for a title? I guess so. Maybe if you have Jones, who maybe doesn't come back, you have Ngannou, who maybe doesn't re-sign with the UFC as well, maybe then he can get to the title picture. But I just don't see it happening. He has that loss to Tom Aspinall where he was dominated in the first round and submitted. He was dominated by Curtis Blades. He's been KO'd by Derek Lewis. He was beat by Cyril Gane. It wasn't utter domination, but I just don't see Volkov being able to compete with the upper, top 5 within the division or top 4 within the division. I just don't see it happening, even though he went out there and took out Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is a very solid fighter himself. It's just one of those things, It sucks because it kind of dampens this win, and it was an impressive win. He went out there against Tom Aspinall and got wrecked. Tom Aspinall lit him up on the feet, chopped the legs, took him down, and straight armbarred him. He got dominated in the first round. UFC London, he makes a quick turnaround, and he puts away a guy that's hard to put away in Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But what does it really mean? Let me know down in the comments. What does this mean? Do you think Alexander Volkov can make a career resurgence? I think he'll hang around for a while. I think he'll do well against those guys, towards the second half of the top 10. But against, those top guys within the heavyweight division, I just don't see it being competitive. We've already seen it. We've already seen those fights. And unless Volkov makes leaps and bounds in his skill set, makes improvements in his skill set, which he can. He has improved. He's not the same Volkov that we saw a few years ago. He has improved, but I just don't see him being competitive for the heavyweight title. Moving down the card, my favorite fight on the card going in was the co-main event, Dan Ige versus Movsar Evloev. And Evloev looked so impressive in this fight. He beat Dan Ige from start to finish, and he beat him anywhere he wanted the fight to go. Going into this fight, I picked Evloev by decision. He won by decision, but I thought he would win it primarily with his grappling. He went out there and he outstruck Dan Ige, and then when he felt like it, he dragged Dan Ige to the ground, and then when it ended up back on the feet, he continued to just bust up Dan Ige, and he's shown that he is ever improving. And when I look at a fighter and I try to determine whether or not I think they're going to be a future contender or I think they're going to be a future champion, I look at their improvement from fight to fight. Evloev's striking looks so much improved in this fight against Dan Ige. And keep in mind, Dan Ige's ranked number 10. He just had a fight with Josh Emmett, which it could have went either way. Emmett won by decision, but I actually scored it for Dan Ige, and it was a very close fight. And look where Josh Emmett is. A lot of people say Josh Emmett's the dark horse in the division. Josh Emmett, if he beats Calvin Kattar later this month, could potentially fight for a title against Volkov. That's just absolutely insane. I mean Volk, not Volkov. I was thinking of the main event. That is insane. And Evloev showed that Dan Ige has nothing to offer for him. He lit him up the entire fight. He landed a nasty flying knee in the first round, rocked Dan Ige, and he showed his patience. He didn't look to swarm him, get too reckless, and get clipped himself. He knew Dan Ige still has nasty KO power, and he was super defensively responsible. There was so much to be impressed with in this fight by Movsar. I mean, he showed great striking defense. He showed great striking offense. He showed great fight IQ. He showed great cardio. This was a decently high-paced fight. This wasn't a very slow-paced fight. Evloev, when he dragged Dan Ige to the ground, he dragged him to the ground multiple times. Even in the third round, Dan Ige started to land a couple shots, and Evloev showed, you know what? I'm going to drag him to the ground real quick. Dragged him to the ground, started throwing a high volume of ground and pound. And by the end of this fight, and I said this in the members Discord chat, it looked like Dan Ige had been jumped by 3 or 4 guys. Evloev wasn't throwing these crazy high-power winging punches, but he was just busting up Dan Ige on the feet and on the ground, and he was just nonstop. It was a relentless pace, and his stamina looked really good. People have talked about his stamina in the past. His stamina looked very good in that third round, and I'm very high on Dan Ige. I think Dan Ige is a very good fighter within the featherweight division, and now Evloev has proved that he can compete with that top tier, that top 10 within the featherweight division. And there's so many great potential matchups for him. I mean, Bryce Mitchell, who wouldn't love to see that fight? Originally in January, I think it was UFC 270, we were supposed to get Evloev versus Topuria. I would kill for that fight right now. You could even match him up with Arnold Allen. I believe he called Arnold Allen out in his post-fight speech. Evloev is the real deal. Evloev could be maybe 2 fights away from a potential title shot, because you look at the division right now, Volkov has beaten a lot of these guys. And if Volk goes out there and beats Max Holloway for a 3rd time, the division is wide open for guys like Bryce Mitchell, for a guy like Arnold Allen, or a guy like Evloev to potentially throw their name in the hat and potentially be looking at a title shot with a big win. It's going to be down to those 3 guys. It appears maybe Yair Rodriguez, because Brian Ortega already fought Volk, lost, got beat up pretty badly. I know people called that fight of the year, but it was a dominant win by Volk, minus the 2 close submission attempts. So it really comes down to those 3 guys if Volk doesn't decide to move up to lightweight. So the division, if Volk beats Max, is wide open. I really want to see Evloev versus Topuria or Bryce Mitchell. Honestly, that would be the 2 fights that I want. But the Arnold Allen fight sounds great too. There's really no matchup out there that I would hate for Evloev next. And there's so many great featherweights. Featherweight has a bunch of young killers. That's the only way I can describe it. And now Evloev is working his way up. He has the win over Hakeem Dawodu. Now he has this win over Dan Ige, which is a really solid win. I can't wait to see where he goes from here, because his skill set is just so good. He's refining his striking. The defensive striking is really solid. The grappling is really good. The offensive grappling is really good. Has great ground and pound. Once he gets in that back mount position, it's just hard to get him off you. And he showed that in this Dan Ige fight too. He kept getting to Dan Ige's back. Dan Ige would get up. He would drag him back to the ground. He has great takedowns, great trips. Evloev, I am on the Movsar Evloev train. I think he's a very good featherweight. Now, I'm not saying he's going to beat guys like Arnold Allen or Bryce Mitchell or Josh Emmett, but I think those fights are very competitive. And I may even, when I take a deeper dive, if he does get matched up with one of those guys, I may pick him in those fights. That's how high I am on him. And I think it's because I was very high on Dan Ige. I picked Dan Ige to beat Josh Emmett. I thought Dan Ige, lost to Edson Barboza, but Edson Barboza I was very high on at that point in time. So this is a very solid win for Evloev, and I can't wait to see where he goes from here. And this was my favorite fight on the card. Okay, a couple more fights on the card. Lucas Almeida got a nasty finish in the 3rd round. This was a crazy fight, back and forth. Both guys getting dropped. There was a headbutt that opened a nasty cut on Mike Trezano. Clipped him badly, almost spun him around, followed up, finished him. Nice win for Lucas Almeida. Corrine Silva, I don't remember how you pronounce her name. Great win, submission in the 1st round, clips her, follows her to the ground, or really takes her down after clipping her, and then locks up a Darce choke. Ode Osborne, I can't even remember how to pronounce the other guy's name. Looks super fluid in there, looks super fast, was getting in and out, clips him badly, finishes him with a KO in the 1st round. It's crazy now that I think about it. So every fight on the main card outside of the co-main event, Dan Ige versus Evloev, was a finish. Alonzo Menningfield versus Askar Mazarov, I think is how you pronounce his name. That was a brutal beatdown. Askar at one point got up after Menningfield took him down and controlled him for like the first 3 minutes, was like throwing strikes and taunting. 10 seconds later, he got shot through, put in the crucifix position, and I thought he was going to die if Herb Dean didn't step in. The elbows Alonzo Menningfield was throwing were brutal. I thought he was going to crush his head in. Thank God Herb Dean stepped in. And one other thing I want to mention, and I can't remember what fight it was in. I think it was in the Evloev fight, but there was other fights. I am so sick and tired of the cage grabbing. I think Dan Ige grabbed the cage a couple times. Evloev had his toes in the cage a couple times. And, particularly just to single out the co-main event, we constantly hear Keith No Nonsense Peterson. The guy just lets whatever go. It's just so annoying. I had to throw that in there. I'm so sick of fence grabs not being penalized in MMA. It's super annoying. But guys, let me know what you thought of this card. Is there any fights that I really missed? Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.